Welcome in, everybody. We're diving deep today into the world of smartphones and social media.
Oh, buckle up. It's a wild one.
We've got a lot to unpack, from professional perspectives to the book Offline by Imran Rashid and Soren Kenner, plus some data on internet and technology trends.
Kind of sets the scene, doesn't it? The numbers are honestly staggering.
We're talking billions of smartphone users globally, spending hours on these devices every day. Offline states that by 2019, over 5 billion people were using smartphones.
Yeah, almost half the planet online.
And with that comes a massive industry.
An industry built on capturing our attention. Think Apple, Google, Facebook. These tech giants are locked in an epic battle for our eyeballs.
Their combined market value is mind-boggling, right?
It's like comparable to entire countries. The UK, Germany.
It really makes you think, what are we trading for all this convenience and connectivity?
There's a cost, for sure. Even back in 2017, Offline points out that advertisers were shelling out over $200 billion just to get our attention.
Wow. Imagine if a fraction of that went towards, like, solving global poverty or climate change.
Priorities, right.
Speaking of priorities, let's talk about our brains. How is all this tech affecting the way we think?
Well, Offline dives into this triune brain model, the idea that our brains evolved in layers.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us.
So the oldest layer, that's our primal instincts, survival stuff. Then there's the limbic system, managing emotions. And the most recent addition, the neocortex.
The neocortex, that's higher level thinking, right?
Right, reasoning, self-control, all that good stuff. But here's the thing. The neocortex is a bit of an energy hog.
And distractions are kryptonite to it.
Exactly. And guess what? The digital world is a master of distraction. Offline calls this DFAG, digital fragmentation syndrome.
Our attention is constantly getting fragmented, pulled in different directions.
Precisely. It's like trying to solve a puzzle while someone keeps shaking the table.
No wonder we feel so scattered sometimes.
And then there's this whole concept of fast and slow thinking. System 1 is automatic, impulsive, and System 2 is more deliberate and analytical.
So our smartphones are basically feeding into System 1 all the time.
You got it. Addictive design, those pings, the notifications, they're all tapping into our desire for instant gratification.
Like that classic Stanford marshmallow experiment where kids struggled to resist the immediate reward.
That's a perfect analogy. All these digital rewards might actually be training us to be less patient.
Constantly bombarded with virtual marshmallows. No wonder we're struggling.
Exactly. It's like having a slot machine in your pocket that's always ready to pay out.
Okay, so we're distracted, impulsive, and potentially less patient. What about our social lives? Is there an impact there too?
Definitely. Offline talks about oxytocin, the hormone that's key for social bonding.
The love hormone, right?
Exactly. But all this screen time may be interfering with our ability to produce it.
So we're trading real-world connections for digital ones.
And it's having an impact. The book even uses the term technoference to describe how devices are intruding on our relationships.
Something a lot of parents are probably struggling with these days.
Absolutely. Parents are on their phones, missing out on precious moments with their kids. It can create distance and hinder development.
And it's not just families, right? Offline connects excessive smartphone use to lower self-esteem and disrupted sleep.
There's definitely a link. Think about it. Social media is constantly feeding us images of perfection. It sets unrealistic expectations and messes with our sleep.
It's like we're outsourcing our self-worth to these devices.
And we're only beginning to understand the long-term consequences. We're in uncharted territory here.
A bit scary, to be honest. But offline doesn't just leave us hanging, right? They offer some solutions.
Absolutely. One big idea is about crafting a life story, a narrative that defines who we are and what we value.
So taking back control, defining our own path, not letting algorithms lead the way.
Exactly. It starts with self-reflection, figuring out what truly matters to us.
So asking ourselves, what are my core values? What brings me joy? How is technology helping or hindering those things?
Precisely. Once we know our values, we can make more conscious choices about our tech use.
Become the masters of our digital domain, so to speak.
And part of that mastery is understanding the game being played.
Yeah.
Offline really pulls back the curtain on the world of digital marketing.
It can feel a little unsettling, like, are we all just guinea pigs in a giant experiment?
Well, the book talks about this researcher from Stanford, B.J. Fogg, who created a model for how tech influences behavior.
Okay, I'm listening. What's the model?
It boils down to motivation, ability, and triggers. Once you understand those elements, you start to see the tactics being used.
So knowledge is power, even when it comes to manipulation.
You got it. Once you see the strings, you're less likely to be a puppet. Think about it. Every notification, every curated post, it's all designed to keep us hooked.
It's like we're all playing a digital slot machine, and the house always wins.
And then there are these things called dark patterns.
Dark patterns. What are those?
There's sneaky design choices that nudge you towards certain actions, things you wouldn't necessarily do otherwise.
Ugh, like those subscription traps where it's nearly impossible to unsubscribe.
Exactly. They're preying on our cognitive biases. It's frustrating.
Infuriating. Makes me want to ditch my phone and live in a tech-free cabin in the woods.
I get it. But before you run off to the wilderness, let's talk about how these companies are gathering information about us.
Data collection. Tracking cookies.
Yeah.
Pixels. It's like we have this digital shadow that follows us everywhere online.
And they use that data to create targeted advertising. It's like they're whispering personalized suggestions in our ears.
Creepy. They can even predict our personality traits just from our online activity, according to Offline.
They're getting good at it. Offline even brings up the Cambridge Analytica scandal.
Oh, right, where they harvested data from millions of Facebook users.
Without consent, no less. And use it to try and influence elections. It was a major wake-up call about data manipulation.
Definitely a reminder that we're not just passive consumers. We're active participants in this system, whether we realize it or not.
And they're constantly experimenting on us. They use multivariate testing to see what works best, what gets us to click and buy.
It's like we're stuck in a giant maze designed to keep us clicking and spending.
A very profitable maze. That's why Offline urges us to become aware of these tactics, to question everything.
See the matrix, so to speak. But what can we actually do about it?
That's where digital mindfulness comes in. It's about having a more conscious relationship with technology.
Okay, so not ditching tech altogether, but using it intentionally.
Exactly. We can enjoy the benefits without letting it rule our lives. Finding that balance is key.
Be the conductor of our digital orchestra, not just a player following someone else's tune.
Love that analogy. And to resist that constant pull, Offline suggests some practical strategies.
Like what? Give us some tips.
Create tech-free zones in your home. Schedule specific times for checking email and social media. Take a digital detox every now and then.
A digital detox. I could use one of those.
Think of it like a digital diet. You can still enjoy those digital treats, but in moderation.
Makes sense. So it's about creating a digital environment that supports our well-being, not one that drains us.
Spot on. But it's not just about individual effort. This needs to be a societal shift as well.
Right, recognizing that our worth isn't measured by likes and followers.
Exactly. It's about the quality of our relationships, the meaning we find in our work, the contributions we make to the world. That's what truly matters.
Offline is really calling for an awakening, isn't it?
It is. It's about reclaiming our attention, our time, our humanity.
Powerful stuff. And I think that's a good place to pause for now. We've covered a lot, but there's still much more to explore.
Indeed. We've only just scratched the surface. So, digging deeper into Offline, there's this fascinating thing called the Peltzman effect.
The Peltzman effect. Rings a bell, but refresh my memory.
Sure. It basically says that when people feel safer, they tend to take more risks.
Okay. I see where you're going with this. Smartphones make us feel safer in some ways, right?
Exactly. Think about it. Constant connectivity, instant access to information. It creates a sense of security.
Like having a safety net, even when we're not really aware of the risks.
And that can lead to problems. We become complacent, less vigilant. Offline suggests that this might be making us less attentive to potential dangers in other areas of life.
Like walking a tightrope blindfolded, assuming someone will catch us if we fall.
Exactly. And it's not just about physical safety. This diminished attention span can affect our ability to think critically, to engage in nuanced discussions about important issues.
Trying to have a meaningful conversation about politics these days feels impossible sometimes.
It's like everyone's distracted by shiny objects, unable to focus on the real challenges we face. Offline even argues that this contributes to the rise of populism and polarization.
Because we're so bombarded with simplistic narratives, quick sound bites, and emotional appeals.
It's hard to separate truth from fiction in that environment, and critical thinking goes out the window.
We're lost in a digital jungle, and our compasses are broken.
Great analogy. And navigating this new landscape requires new skills. Offline emphasizes media literacy, skepticism, actively seeking out diverse perspectives.
So we need to become savvy digital consumers, not just passive absorbers of information.
Think of it like becoming a digital detective. Question everything. Check your sources. Look beyond the surface.
But is that enough? Can we really change the game if the rules are rigged against us?
Well, offline suggests that we need to demand more transparency from tech companies, hold them accountable for the way their platforms are being used.
Use our collective voice to advocate for more human-centric design.
Exactly. We have more power than we realize. Now, offline does acknowledge that technology can be a force for good, right?
Of course, used wisely, it has incredible potential.
For communication, learning, connection. The book encourages using these tools for those positive purposes.
Connecting with loved ones, accessing information, even cultivating mindfulness.
But how do we balance those benefits with the risks we've been discussing?
That's the million-dollar question.
Offline suggests setting boundaries, creating tech-free zones, scheduling specific times for email and social media.
Like creating a healthy digital diet, as we talked about earlier.
Exactly. You can have your digital cake and eat it too, but in moderation. The book also suggests using technology to support personal goals.
There are some great apps out there for mindfulness, productivity, even connecting with nature.
So you can tailor your digital environment to support your well-being, not sabotage it.
But what about kids? They're growing up in this hyper-connected world.
It's a real concern. Offline stresses the importance of modeling healthy digital habits.
Actions speak louder than words.
Exactly. If we're constantly on our phones, kids will pick up those habits. It's also important to create tech-free family rituals, engage in activities that promote creativity, and have open conversations about the risks and benefits of technology.
We need to equip them with the skills to be responsible digital citizens.
Prepare them for the digital landscape they'll inherit. Now, offline also explores some of the cognitive challenges associated with excessive technology use. One is decision fatigue.
Decision fatigue. That sounds exhausting.
It is. Our brains have a limited capacity for making decisions. When we're constantly bombarded with choices, it wears us down.
So all those notifications, emails, and choices we have to make online
Right.
actually deplete our mental energy.
Exactly. And it leads to impulsivity, poor judgment, even procrastination.
Makes sense, we're just mentally drained.
Offline argues that this constant mental overload hinders our ability to focus, to think deeply, to solve complex problems.
It's like trying to write a novel while juggling chainsaws.
Vivid image. And then there's the impact on our sleep.
Ah, yes, the dreaded blue light.
It messes with our melatonin production, making it harder to fall asleep and stay asleep.
And when we're sleep deprived, everything suffers. Our mood, our energy, our ability to think clearly.
It's like trying to function on fumes. And then there's the shrinking attention span.
Our ability to focus is definitely taking a hit. It's harder than ever to stay engaged with one task without getting distracted.
Our brains are wired for novelty and stimulation, and technology provides an endless supply.
Like having a TV channel that's constantly flipping between shows.
Offline suggests that this erosion of focus has serious implications for learning, creativity, meaningful work.
Deep work requires sustained attention. It's like trying to paint a masterpiece while someone keeps changing the canvas every few minutes.
Exactly. Offline recommends cultivating mindfulness, practicing single tasking, creating distraction-free environments.
Training our attention muscles, so to speak.
Precisely. But it's not just an individual effort. We need to create a culture that values deep work and focused attention.
Make space for those activities that require sustained focus and concentration.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about how technology is affecting our social landscape. Offline discusses social media tribalism.
Oh yeah, the tendency to form online echo chambers where everyone agrees with you.
It reinforces our biases and makes it harder to engage with different perspectives.
It's like going to a potluck dinner where everyone brought the same dish.
And that can be dangerous. It leads to polarization, hinders civil discourse.
Offline argues that this tribalism is eroding our ability to find common ground, to solve problems together.
We need to be willing to listen to each other, to engage in respectful dialogue, even when we disagree.
Building bridges, not walls.
Exactly. And on a related note, offline highlights the dangers of cyberbullying.
The anonymity of the internet can bring out the worst in people sometimes.
And the damage can be lasting. It's crucial to educate children and teens about responsible online behavior.
We need to foster a culture of empathy and respect, both online and offline.
It's about treating each other with dignity, regardless of the medium. Speaking of self-perception, let's talk about how technology affects our sense of self. Offline examines social comparison.
Social media is a breeding ground for that, isn't it? We're constantly comparing ourselves to others coming up short.
It creates unrealistic expectations, leads to feelings of inadequacy.
It's like attending a costume party where everyone else is dressed to the nines and you're wearing pajamas.
Offline argues that this constant comparison is taking a toll on our mental health.
We need to focus on self-acceptance, cultivate gratitude, limit social media exposure.
Remember, our worth isn't determined by likes and followers. Now, let's turn our attention to relationships. Offline discusses technoference.
That word perfectly captures it. It's like technology is always butting in.
Checking phones during conversations, responding to emails during dinner. It sends the message that the person in front of you is less important than your digital distractions.
Like trying to have a heart-to-heart with someone who's constantly checking their watch.
Offline suggests creating tech-free zones in our homes, setting rules for phone use during meals, being more present with loved ones.
It's about prioritizing those real-life connections, giving them the attention they deserve.
Our relationships are our most valuable assets. We need to nurture them. Now, let's dive into technology's impact on creativity and imagination. Offline explores digital distraction.
It's tough to be creative when you're constantly bombarded with notifications and updates.
Our brains need quiet and solitude to generate new ideas, to make those unexpected connections.
It's like trying to write a symphony while a marching band is practicing next door.
Offline suggests carving out distraction-free zones, engaging in activities that spark creativity, scheduling unplugged time.
Giving our imaginations space to breathe.
Exactly. And speaking of inner exploration, offline delves into digital escapism, the tendency to use technology to avoid difficult emotions or challenges.
It's a tempting escape route, but it's not a sustainable solution.
Offline encourages mindfulness, engaging in activities that bring joy, seeking support from loved ones.
Facing our challenges head-on, not hiding from them in the digital world.
Well said. Now, let's shift our focus to technology's impact on physical health. Offline examines sedentary behavior, all that time we spend sitting, glued to screens.
Our bodies weren't designed for that. We need to move.
Exactly. All that sitting is contributing to a host of health problems, from obesity to heart disease.
Offline urges us to prioritize movement, incorporate physical activity into our daily routines, take breaks from screens to stretch and walk.
It's about treating our bodies with respect, giving them the movement they need to thrive.
And speaking of thriving, let's talk about our connection to nature. Offline introduces this concept of nature deficit disorder.
It's a real thing. Kids especially are spending less time outdoors, less time experiencing the wonders of the natural world.
It's like we've traded the forest for a digital jungle.
And it's taking a toll. Offline encourages us to make a conscious effort to spend time outdoors, to connect with nature, to rediscover that sense of awe and wonder.
Let's get those kids playing in the dirt again.
Exactly. And speaking of connection, let's delve into how technology affects our sense of community. Offline examines social isolation, the feeling of loneliness that can arise when we rely too heavily on digital interactions.
It's a paradox, isn't it? We're more connected than ever, yet many of us feel increasingly isolated.
Offline encourages us to nurture our real-world relationships, engage in activities that bring us together, prioritize face-to-face interaction.
Building those genuine human connections.
Exactly. It's those real-life interactions that nourish our souls.
Now let's shift our focus to privacy. Offline pulls back the curtain on data collection, revealing the extent to which our online activities are being tracked, monitored, and analyzed.
It can feel like Big Brother is always watching.
Every click, every search, every purchase, it's all being recorded, creating these detailed profiles about us.
Offline suggests becoming more aware of these practices, taking steps to protect our privacy, supporting policies that safeguard our digital rights.
Reclaiming control over our personal information.
Exactly. Our privacy matters. Now, let's talk about security. Offline delves into the growing threat of cybercrime.
It's a digital Wild West out there.
Our personal information, our financial data, our identities are vulnerable. Offline encourages us to educate ourselves about cybersecurity, take steps to protect our devices and accounts, support policies that promote online safety.
Be proactive, be vigilant. Don't be an easy target.
Exactly. And let's not forget about the potential for technology to exacerbate social inequalities.
The digital divide is a real issue. Not everyone has equal access to technology or the skills to use it effectively.
Offline argues that this gap is contributing to a widening gap between the haves and have-nots.
We need to invest in digital literacy programs, expand access to affordable internet, create policies that promote digital equity.
Ensure that everyone has the opportunity to benefit from the digital world.
Now let's talk about the environmental impact of technology. Offline discusses how the production, use, and disposal of electronic devices have a significant environmental footprint.
We can't ignore that. Our digital habits have real-world consequences.
Offline advocates for a more sustainable approach, reducing our consumption, recycling responsibly, supporting companies committed to environmental sustainability.
It's about recognizing that our planet's resources are precious and finite.
We need to be mindful of our impact. But as we wrap up this section, I think it's important to acknowledge that offline isn't just about the problems. It also celebrates the incredible potential of technology.
Absolutely. It can connect us, educate us, empower us. It's about using it as a tool for good, not letting it control us.
The book encourages us to be mindful, intentional, and to advocate for a more human-centric digital future.
It's a call to action, a call to reclaim our agency and shape a digital world that reflects our values.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground. Offline provides a deep and insightful analysis of our complex relationship with technology.
It's given us a framework for understanding the challenges and opportunities we face in this digital age.
And now, let's move on to our final segment, where we'll synthesize the key takeaways from this deep dive and offer some concluding thoughts.
Wow, what a journey. We've explored so much in this deep dive, from the neuroscience of our brains to the tactics of the attention economy.
It's a complex landscape, that's for sure. But offline doesn't just leave us feeling overwhelmed, does it?
Definitely not. It offers a way forward, empowering us to take control of our digital lives.
One of the most powerful takeaways for me is this idea of becoming conscious creators, not passive consumers.
Right. Like, we have a choice in how we engage with technology.
And we can even use those same platforms that are designed to hook us to, well, unhook ourselves.
Turn the tables on them, so to speak.
Exactly. Once we understand how persuasive technology works, we can spot those triggers, those things that make us mindlessly scroll and develop strategies to break those habits.
So offline is really encouraging us to examine our values, to think about our goals, and how technology fits into all of that.
It's about asking ourselves, is this serving me or am I serving it? Becoming the architects of our digital world, not just living in someone else's design.
That's a great way to put it. And it does take effort, right? This isn't about becoming Luddites and abandoning technology altogether. It's about finding that balance.
Mindful engagement.
Think of it like tending a garden. You carefully choose what to plant, you nurture those plants, and you weed out the things that are harmful.
Love that analogy.
Yeah.
And offline gives us some practical tools to do that weeding, right? Like creating those tech-free zones, setting limits on app use, silencing notifications.
Reclaiming our attention, directing it towards things that truly nourish us.
It's a shift in mindset, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's also about shifting our priorities as a society, realizing that true fulfillment doesn't come from chasing likes or accumulating followers.
It's about meaningful relationships, pursuing passions, making a contribution to the world.
Offline paints a picture of a future where technology enhances our lives, not diminishes them, where we use it for good, for connection, for creativity.
It's a vision worth striving for, and one that's within our reach.
Absolutely. By becoming more aware, making conscious choices, and advocating for change, we can create that future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into offline, let's recap those key takeaways, shall we? Are you ready for a top 10?
Hit me with it. Let's empower our listeners.
Okay, number 1, smartphones and social media are everywhere, creating this massive industry that's competing for our attention.
Number 2, our brains are wired for both instant gratification and thoughtful decision-making, and those addictive design tactics, they exploit our impulses.
Number 3, excessive technology use can actually interfere with oxytocin production, potentially leading to less empathy and more isolation.
Number 4, tech companies use all sorts of sophisticated strategies like persuasive design and those sneaky dark patterns to capture and monetize our attention.
Number 5, constant connectivity can lead to decision fatigue, making it harder to make good choices and think clearly.
Number 6, that blue light from our devices, it messes with our sleep, which affects everything from our mood to our cognitive abilities.
Number 7, social media, with all that comparison, can fuel feelings of inadequacy and lower self-esteem.
Number 8, techno-friends. Those digital intrusions into our face-to-face interactions can damage relationships.
Number 9, those digital distractions make it hard to focus, to be creative, to do meaningful work.
And finally, number 10, we have the power to reclaim our attention, to set boundaries, to cultivate healthy digital habits, and to advocate for a more human-centric digital future.
There you have it, folks, our top 10 takeaways from offline. We hope this has given you some food for thought, some ideas for how to navigate this digital world with more awareness and intention.
It's a journey, for sure, but it's a journey worth taking.
Absolutely. And if you're looking for more resources or want to connect with others who are on this path, Offline recommends checking out the website www.humansbeforetech.com.
A great place to explore these ideas further and join the movement for a more mindful digital world.
And with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Until next time, be well, and remember, the power to shape our digital lives is in our hands.